The fourth and final poem I'm going to share with you seems to have had the most impact of any of my poems, as it has been widely published and was placed on the British literature syllabus at the University of Connecticut in the US just weeks after it was written. The poem, The Day Mr Zephaniah Died, is a tribute to the celebrated poet and writer Benjamin Zephaniah, who died in December 2023. I was commissioned to write the poem on the day he passed away, and did so within 3 days, as I felt very inspired to do so. I'll read the poem first, and then set out how it was written and what it means to me. The Day Mr Zephaniah Died, after Frank O'Hara. On the 7th day of the 12th month, 2023, at the National Maritime Museum, a minute since the break began, I wished the woman in my class would not look at her phone. Tell us you were gone, leaving this behind, a chill that traps the room, when freedom is our aim, to write that poetry can open prison doors. Your voice was key to that great task, brummy to your core, with a prophet's force, labelled worthless by police when only a young man, growing strong enough with words to decline an OBE, your stated aim to bring empire down, rhythm and not guns, rhymes instead of bombs. We fill the break with, is it true, perhaps a dreadful hoax, checking every phone, the chill 10 minutes long, seeing it writ large, your birth date and your death. Now the class must share a poem, Langston Hughes alive again. Freedom will not come through compromise and fear. But the man who reads this out in a gentle voice has to stop, contain his tears, the day that you were gone. The poem is based on my experience of hearing about Benjamin Zephaniah's death when I was facilitating a poetry workshop at the National Maritime Museum. The poem is after, or in other words, closely inspired by the poem The Day Lady Died by the American poet Frank O'Hara, who was famous in the 50s and 60s for writing informal poems that reference daily life. I've always liked the poem based on his memories of hearing about Billie Holiday's death, especially as he was a great jazz enthusiast and clearly loved her singing. In his poem, he writes, "She whispered a song along the keyboard," which suggests for him she was at one with the instrument and an artist who had the power to soothe the listener. In my poem, I wanted to detail how the news of Benjamin Zephaniah's death caused a physical sensation, a chill that traps the room. This suggests the passing of something great, a spirit who touched others, as I think so many people do when they die, whether they are famous or not. I also wanted to ground the poem in quite ordinary details, describing him as a Brummie to his core, and to suggest the brutality he suffered at the hands of the police when he was a young man, called worthless. Yet despite this, he found a way to transcend oppression and speak truth to power, growing strong enough with words to decline an OBE. In my poem, there's a sense of disbelief at his passing. Is it true? I think this accompanies all deaths, as they are so final and devastating. But I also wanted to suggest that there is no death, that we always live on in some way. I tried to do this by using the idea of the group reading a poem by the African-American poet Langston Hughes, who is alive again in his words. The Hughes poem I refer to is called Freedom, and was written in the early 1950s as a plea for justice and civil rights in an America that was riven with inequality. The first stanza goes like this: "Freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever, through compromise and fear." As described in my poem, a male participant in the workshop became tearful when reading those few lines, which I think suggests the shock so many people felt when they heard about Benjamin Zephaniah's death. I was very careful to make sure that the two participants I mentioned in the poem were happy for me to reference them, as I felt it was important not to infringe on their private grief. In writing a tribute to a poet and in referencing two others, I hope my poem suggests the ways in which words build on each other in order to make poetry a mighty monument to the human spirit.